Hello, welcome everyone to Regal's Build Your Own Agent AI webinar. Just going to wait for a few more people to join, so give us a few minutes. Grab a beverage, take a look out your window. It's rainy here in New York today, but hopefully is slightly better weather where you are. All right, I see people pouring in from all over. As a reminder, the Q&A function is on for today's webinar, and Rebecca, our co-founder and CTO, loves to answer questions. So feel free to ask any questions you'd like about the content that we share today or anything related to like Regal, voice AI, or our AI agents. We're happy to answer them for you here towards the end. All right. Well, with that in mind, we will go ahead and get started. So again, welcome to Regal's Build Your Own AI Agent webinar. I'm Ali. I'm VP of Marketing here at Regal, and I'm really excited to bring you guys this immersive session where you'll watch a working AI agent come to life in less than an hour with no engineering required. We hear from customers all the time that AI is everywhere. They're hearing about it in boardrooms, on social media, in forums, in their, peer groups. But it's really hard and sometimes daunting to figure out where to get started and how to get started. The other thing that people sometimes don't understand is like, how does AI impact a business user? Someone who's not a developer, who's not an IT professional. How can they leverage AI within the contact center or within the customer experience world in a way that's actually meaningful for them? And we hope that if you walked into today's session with any of those questions, they will no longer be questions by the end of our time here today. Because in today's webinar, we're going to show you how Regal's powerful no-code platform helps companies build AI phone agents that drive more revenue, lower costs, and boost CSAT, all without hiring more reps, which is great. To keep things fun today, and hopefully give all of you something to look forward to this summer, besides implementing your own AI phone agents, of course. We are giving away a pickleball set to a lucky winner at the end of today's webinar. So feel free to check the chat out, and you should get more details on our winner later today in the session. So with that in mind, you guys are sick of hearing from me, and I can't share and drop all the knowledge that she's about to. So I will pass it over to, again, Regal's CTO and co-founder, Rebecca Green, who is going to be leading today's content.
Awesome. Thank you, Ali. I'm excited to show you all how easy it is to get started with AI voice agents and how Regal has designed a product that particularly makes it easy for you to build a successful agent in your contact center. So we've already got the Regal product open here. And I just wanted to show you that there are many use cases for which AI agents are successful and able to handle conversations in your contact center. These are some of the most popular ones: inbound handling, customer support, lead qualification, appointment scheduling, collections. What I'm going to demo today, just for fun, is a life insurance lead qualification use case. And what I'll do is, instead of starting from here, I'll go ahead to where you can build a custom agent, and I will start from scratch. Now, in Regal, you can actually select a voice agent and still use a helpful template just to get you started. So I'll pick one lead qualification, since that's the closest thing to my use case. And I'll pick next, but I'm going to mostly erase much of the content here and just use it as a starting off point. So first, I just want to show you and orient you to what it kind of looks like to build an AI voice agent. So you can actually pick a bunch of different settings about the agent, and we'll play with some of these and see how it affects the agent performance. But you could pick the voice, you can modify how that voice sounds, you can pick the language, you can pick a bunch of different voice settings here or call settings here, which we'll play with in a minute. And then really what we've done is structured here the goal of an agent. Just like if you think about a human agent and when you're training them, it's very similar to an AI agent. You want to give them something overarching to focus on in their conversations that guides them. And so that's their role and goals. You want to tell them exactly how the script or task should be performed. You don't have to say verbatim exactly what they should say, but you can mark up exactly kind of how you want the call to flow in different edge cases. And that's what we'll go in task steps. Then you can give them questions and objection handling, right? So customers, not every conversation goes exactly how you've scripted it, and customers will take the agent off script, and that's quite all right for AI agents. But you'll want to have some questions and objection handling for the agent so that you can lock down compliantly how you want them to perform, as well as the common types of responses you'd want to give for that. We've got guardrails, and that's where you would clarify for the agent the scope of its role and what it cannot do and say. Agent style, where you can really put in your brand guidelines and dictate the kind of personality, I guess, of the agent. And then finally, the greeting, exactly how you want to start the call. And so we'll go through all of these as we're building out our AI agent, and I'll start from top to bottom. In terms of the role and goals, let's go ahead and say that we want to create an AI agent named Kate. And we said that she's going to be a life insurance lead qualification agent. And she'll ask, let's say she needs to ask 3 qualification questions just to make sure the customer is actually qualified to work with this life insurance company. And then the goal is to transfer them to a licensed advisor. And the reason why you might want this use case in your contact center is in the insurance space, licensed advisors are expensive and they spend most of their time speaking to unqualified leads, trying to qualify them first. And so this is an opportunity, it's a great opportunity for AI agents to first do a set of qualification questions that don't require a license, remove the customers who are not qualified, and transfer over the customers who are qualified to the licensed agent to go ahead and sell them. So let's modify this a bit. You're a contact center agent at Circle. Let's just make up a name of a company, Circle Life. Your job is to pre-qualify. In this case, they're not loan applicants, they're life insurance applicants who submit a lead on your website. After you qualify them, you'll transfer them to a licensed, let's just say, advisor. Great. And then this, let's say the common things we're going to want to track for this AI agent. In our case, transfer rate is going to be important. Maybe we'll want to see calls that last 60 seconds because that means it was like an actually good conversation or an engaged conversation. Containment rate is a common thing. If a customer asks a question that the AI agent can't sufficiently answer, we'll want to understand how often do they have to escalate, not because the customer is qualified, but because they can't answer it. And maybe we'll pick abandon rate too. We'd expect the abandon rate to be 0 because AI agents are endlessly scalable, and so they should always answer the phone. All right. Now we're going to go ahead and tell the agent what it should actually do. And in my example, I want to do something simple with you all. I want to just have the agent ask 3 qualifying questions, understand the qualification decision, like what criteria is needed for a customer to be qualified and transfer. And then if the customer is not qualified, we're going to tell them why and end the call. But if they are qualified, we'll go ahead and transfer them to that licensed advisor. And so this template is showing me how to think about this. The content is less important because we're going to modify that, but you can see that it's like ordinal, right? It's task steps. 1, do this. 2, do this thing. And then here we've got kind of what do you do if a customer goes off the happy path? So the 1, 2, 3, the task steps are kind of representative of the happy path, assuming the customer passes each qualifying question prior. And then if this happens, do this, or if this happens, do this, kind of takes off the happy path and how to handle those situations. And that's a common paradigm you're going to use when you're prompting your AI agents. So let's see if we can start by modifying this. So start by saying, all right, this one says, hello, this is Olivia from Circle Bank. How are you? We're going to go ahead and say, hi. Let's start with our name. This is Kate from Circle Life, I think we called it. How are you today? And we'll start with that. I'm also going to kind of remove these other ones since we're not going to really use them. Okay, now let's say the customer says they're great or they have a question, whatever that is. The next thing I'd expect the agent to do is, let's say, collect first and last name so that they can address the customer in a personalized way. So maybe we'll say something like, ask the customer if you can get their first and last name to get started. And we just want to make sure we do something like this so that it feels like a more personalized conversation. I'll later show you if you already have this information. Let's say the customer submitted a lead form and already provided their first name. Then the benefit of AI agents is they don't need to ask that again. We can just use that and instantly refer to the customer. So I'll show you that example afterwards. So ask the customer for their first and last name to get started. And then let's say we want to go into the qualification questions next. So the 3 qualification, first of all, we'll want to make sure the customer actually knows what this call flow is going to be. So maybe we'll let the customer know, and I've got my notes here, that you just have a few questions to ask. And then we'll get them connected to a licensed advisor to understand the policy options. So, I'm working off my notes that I thought about what I want this agent to do. More often, a customer, since this is a fake example, but a customer would have a script that they've already written for their human agents who are performing these calls, or they would have recordings that their human agents are doing, and they would bring them to Regal, and we'd be able to help kind of translate that into the agent. So here's the next thing I want to do. I want to let the customer know I just have a few questions and then get them connected to the licensed advisor. And then I want to go into my questions. So I think it's common in life insurance. I'm not an expert, but there's a couple of things usually they ask you. I think usually the age, because that determines certain policies can only apply to people of a certain age. So we'll ask how old you are. The next question I want to ask is, what brings them to Circle Life? Like, what is the motivation for getting life insurance now? Just so the licensed advisor can personalize their conversation after the transfer happens. And then I'm going to ask them if they're a smoker. Maybe like health risks or other ways of asking that are better, but I'll be blunt. And let's make sure that let's have the qualification criteria be that the customer must be between the ages of 18 or 80, 18 and 80, because they don't serve customers that are younger or older than that. And let's say that the qualification criteria is that you can't be a smoker. And so we'll use that. So just so we remember that, actually, let's go ahead and put our qualification criteria down here as well, because that'll be important for the agent to decide if they should actually transfer the customer. All right, so let's get to our first question, which is how old are you? So first, how old are you? And we have some branching here that we want to do, right? We want to say if the customer is younger than 18, you need to tell them that you can't serve them. And if they're older than 80, you need to tell them that you can't serve them, else you want to kind of continue. So let's go ahead and put that. So if the customer is younger than 18, in this case, what I'm going to do is actually say we're going to end the call and let them know that we can't serve them. And I'll write something crude for now, and then we'll clean up and make it a little bit nicer. So one thing we're going to do here is that we haven't done yet is I'm going to invoke an action. So we have this action here that's by default on every voice agent, the ability to end the call. So here I'm going to do end call and say, unfortunately, we can't serve you. Have a nice day. I'll put nicer language later. The other thing we want to say similarly, and I'll copy paste this for now, if the customer is older than 80, same thing. We're going to say like end call and say, unfortunately, we can't serve you. Have a nice day. Okay. So maybe now let's get through all of our questions and then we'll do a quick test and see how it sounds. And then we'll modify from there since it's not a very long agent. Okay, so that's the age qualification. Let's do the why are they looking for insurance? And why are you looking for insurance today? Okay, the agent doesn't have any decision criteria off of that. We're not going to disqualify or qualify people on behalf of the reason that they said. We just want to collect that information so we can send that to the agent when we transfer it. So there's no branching criteria here that we need to do. And finally, I forgot to put ask why are you looking for insurance today? And then finally, let's do ask if they are a smoker. And here we know that actually will impact whether we continue and whether they're qualified or not. All right, so then the final step after they've asked those questions now are to determine if the customer should actually be transferred to a licensed agent. And the criteria we have is if they qualify to transfer to a licensed agent based on this qualification criteria, then we want to call a transfer function or transfer action, which we haven't created yet. So we'll create that. And if they don't qualify, similarly, we'll want to end the call. So let's make that step 7. So determine if the customer should be transferred to a licensed agent. Good thing we have spell check on this, to a licensed advisor. And then they're going to do different things if they should. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this just so you don't have to watch me type the whole thing. But we'll put this criteria in and say, determine if the customer should be transferred to a licensed advisor. If they qualify to be transferred to a licensed agent, we're going to call a function called transfer call, which we haven't created yet, so we'll do that. And then say, I'll transfer you to a licensed advisor. But if they don't qualify, similarly to here, we're going to end the call and say, unfortunately, we can't provide insurance to you. Best of luck. And here I'll also, it is best practice instead of just referencing the action to tell the agent to call that function. Behind the scenes, it is a function. And so I'll just do that here as well. Okay, so that is basically our task steps. What we want to do here, the last piece, you can see that end call shows up in green, and that's an visual indicator to you that there is an actual action that you've defined that does that, but transfer call is not showing up here. So I'm going to go create that transfer call function here. So I'm just going to click in here and pick, let's do an external transfer. So I called it transfer call. Now, these are actions, right? You can enable your agent to not just talk the talk, but walk the walk and actually take actions throughout the course of a call. The actions I'm showing you today are simple call actions like transfer a call, end a call, but it can also do powerful things like check your database for certain data and bring back a result, take action in your CRM. I'm not showing that example today, but you can build, again, without code, custom functions that do that stuff as well, right in the Regal platform. So for this one, we're just going to say transfer the call when the customer is qualified to speak to a licensed advisor. And I don't have an actual phone number to transfer to, so I'll just put my phone number in for now. Cool. And then I want to click the speak during execution because I told the agent to say something while they're transferring the call, like I forget exactly what I said, but basically I'll transfer you now to a licensed advisor. So I check that, select that option. All right, so we've got our agent and their task steps. I haven't yet gone through the questions and objection handling. We'll add that in a minute. Let's just remove, I think, what we had here because these are not relevant for our use case. These come from the template. We'll leave that one there. And then these other ones I'm going to keep as is, except for greeting. I'm going to make this the agent is going to start, and I'm going to pick dynamic message because we already tell the agent how to start the conversation. We have other options here where you could specify the exact message, or you could say contact speaks first. That's for more of an outbound case. I'm building an inbound case in our example, and so I'm going to leave it as the AI agent does a dynamic message. And I just saw this actually, it's best practice. This is totally up to you, but it is best practice to acknowledge that it is a virtual agent when a customer calls in or when you're placing an outbound call. So I'm just going to modify this a little bit and do that. So this is Kate, a virtual agent from Circle Life. How are you today? Okay, we'll do that. Let's go ahead and test our agent. So I'm going to save the agent. Okay, and then we'll test it out. I also forgot to give it an internal name. We'll do that afterwards. So let's go ahead and click this button, which is test agent, and the agent is going to start speaking to me. We'll have a conversation and we'll see if the task steps, if the tone is good, and if we want to change anything about the voice, if the way that the agent navigates through the task steps is right, or if we need to modify our prompting, and we'll see how it goes.
Hi, this is Kate, a virtual agent from Circle Life. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm glad to hear that you're doing well. I'm here to assist you with your life insurance inquiry. Could you please provide me with your first and last name to get started?
Yeah, it's Rebecca Green.
Thank you, Rebecca Green. I just have a few questions to ask, and then I'll connect you to a licensed advisor to discuss policy options and provide a custom quote. First, could you please tell me how old you are?
Yeah, I'm 16.
Unfortunately, we can't serve you. Have a nice day.
All right, so you heard how the agent sounded. It did the first use case right, or the first test case that if I'm younger than 18, it ended the call and said they couldn't serve me. I want to modify a few things here. I thought the agent sounded a little bit fast. So I'm going to go here to the voice settings and start talking about these. So you can pick a bunch of different voices from the Regal platform. Some sometimes voice is just a matter of taste. So I happen to like this voice. I'll leave that as is. We can change it later just to see what it feels like. That's more fun. The speed here, it's pretty fast to me. So I'm gonna go ahead and like just bring it down to 1. Um, oh, I'll move this. Okay, cool. On the voice temperature, so what does this mean? This means like how variable and how emotional the voice can get. I don't expect there to be very high emotion in this conversation. It's pretty simple 3 lead qualification question. So I'm gonna pick a voice temperature under 1. A voice temperature higher than 1 means the AI agent can express a lot of emotion, positive and negative, depending on how the customer reacts. A voice temperature under 1 means they're gonna be a little bit more even keeled in the conversation. That doesn't mean they're not gonna respond if the customer says something exciting or sad. They will still say the right thing, but it means like the way the pitch of the voice changes, it'll be more predictable. So I tend to pick a pitch that's lower or a temperature that's lower than 1. Um, I thought the voice volume was fine. There are use cases where, if it's an elderly audience or it's a use case where it's out in the field in a construction site or something like that, you might want to raise the voice volume and make sure that they're louder. And then similarly, responsiveness, that's how fast the agent is going to respond after the customer finishes speaking. For most use cases, a responsiveness of 1 is what you want. That's the highest, most responsive. It means it doesn't delay at all. As soon as it believes the customer has finished speaking, it will respond back, and that's really what you want. But there are use cases, again, I would say for like an elderly population or cases where you expect the customer to be very verbose in like the way they're describing what happened to them or the reason for calling, where you might want the agent to be a little bit slower. I wouldn't take responsiveness down to like 80, but if you're like, oh, I want them to pause for a couple seconds before they respond to the customer, that is a use case. And I mostly have seen it for an elderly audience where they tend to drag out the words they're saying and they like are a bit slower on finishing their thoughts and sentences, in which case you don't want the agent to like be cutting them off too often. And then finally, interruption sensitivity. I didn't try to test this, but something around this is usually fine, which is if the agent starts giving a long speech and I, as a customer, want to say, no, 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 you're wrong. That's not what I wanted. How quickly does the AI agent recognize the customer's trying to interrupt them and stop so that they can listen to the customer? This is usually fine. Again, there are some use cases if it's a population or a use case where there's a lot of background noise, like a loud TV or again, in a construction site, where you might want the interruption sensitivity to be less sensitive, like lower, so that the AI agent again like isn't too sensitive to stop and start because they hear a bunch of background noise. So I don't think any of these things need to change for our use case. All I want to do is change these 2 for now. Let's go ahead and save, and I'll save my agent as well. And now let's do another test case. So I'm going to do a test case where I'm of age so that the agent can keep going down.
Hi, this is Kate, a virtual agent from Circle Life. How are you today?
I'm great, thanks.
That's wonderful to hear. May I have your first and last name to get started?
Rebecca Green.
Thank you, Rebecca Green. I just have a few questions to ask, and then I'll connect you to a licensed advisor to understand policy options and get a custom quote. First, how old are you?
I'm 35.
Thank you for that information. Next, could you please tell me why you are looking for insurance today?
Oh yeah, I just gave birth to my first child.
Congratulations on the birth of your child. That's a wonderful reason to consider life insurance. Now, may I ask if you are a smoker?
No, I never smoked.
Great. Thank you for confirming that. Based on the information you've provided, you qualify to be transferred to a licensed advisor. I'll transfer you now.
Great. So we see that the agent goes through the entire task and accurately qualifies me. And so they're going to transfer me. Now we're in a test UI, so they can't actually transfer the call, but we'll place a test phone call through the actual phone later. And you can see that I didn't have to prompt the agent to, if the customer says their reason for calling is because they gave birth to a new child, which is a very common reason why people get life insurance, or especially the first time around. I didn't have to prompt the agent to like say congrats on having a baby. It automatically knows that. And the reason it knows to do that is, one, because this is generative AI, it's built on an LLM. And so they are smarter and understand what these things mean. And so they're going to react like a normal human would. Two is I never gave it any guardrails to say that it couldn't do something like that. And three, I have defined, because of the template we're working off of, I have defined a template personality for this agent. We'll go ahead and now change that personality and see how it changes the quality of the agent. But that's the power of voice AI agents. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's start playing a little bit with agent style. Also, I'm gonna just give my agent a name. So we'll call this like life insurance. There we go. Okay, so here's what I have in my agent style. It's reasonable things, be professional, be encouraging and supportive. That's likely the reason that the agent reacted when I said I had a new baby. Be transparent if asked about being an AI. Embrace variety so that it doesn't sound too repetitive. You'll notice in my task steps, sometimes I specify exactly the words it should say by putting it in a quote. And sometimes I just say, ask the customer for their first and last name. So the agent has choice, right, in the way that they want to ask that question. Same, first, how old are you? That I kind of said I should probably write it like this, because I'm trying to get it to say it in an exact way. But when I say ask if they're a smoker or ask why they're looking for insurance today, I'm not specifying exactly how to say it. And so it can fill in the gaps. Your choice of doing that really is about how much you want to control the agent and the way that it has a conversation. For example, if you need it to say a privacy statement or a TCPA statement or something that has a lot of compliance risk, then you'll want to verbatim define the exact sentence it should say. Otherwise, you kind of want variety in the way that an agent will say something or ask it, because it'll actually react to how the conversation is going and it'll sound more natural to not say the exact thing every single time. And so that's why I put here embrace variety as well. All right. So now what I want to do is remove some of this, and I'm actually going to give it something very off kilter, which is probably not what you would do, but it's just to prove the point that you really can layer in your brand guidelines here of the way that you want this agent personality to be. So I'm just going to say something like, you are very funny, and make lots of jokes. And let's see how that changes the way that the agent conducts that conversation. Notice I'm not changing anything about the task steps itself or any of the words I'm asking it to say. So let's go ahead and save. And I'll go ahead and test again.
Hi, this is Kate, a virtual agent from Circle Life. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for asking. Just here living my best virtual life. Now let's get this party started. Could you please tell me your first and last name?
Yes, it's Rebecca Green.
Great to meet you, Rebecca Green. I just have a few questions to ask, and then I'll get you connected to a licensed advisor to understand your policy options and get a custom quote. First, how old are you?
21.
Awesome. You're in the prime of your life. Now, why are you looking for insurance today?
All right, I'll stop it there. But you can see that it added living my best virtual life, something like that. It added, it responded to my age to tell me I'm in the prime of my life. That's because of the personality that I gave to the agent. And so you can really, let's say you're I don't know, in a life insurance company. I assume most brands would be highly professional in that situation. But let's say you're a pet brand, right? You're selling pet insurance or pet products or something, and you have some personality that your brand has in your text messages or your social media. Trying to recreate that same brand personality is a really um, unique and positive thing that you can do now with AI agents in a way that you could never do it with contact center agents, who are all humans, all have their own personalities. It's very challenging to get them to align to your brand guidelines and the personality you want. And now you can have voice agents that um, are consistent with your social media presence and your website and your text messages and all of that. So I'm going to go ahead and roll that back because that's probably not appropriate in a life insurance use case. And just to show you how easy it is to do that. So every time I save an agent, we have a version history that we're saving. And I can click this old version of our agent before I change the agent style. And I'm going to go ahead and restore this version. Okay, so now we're working back from the agent we had before. One other thing I noticed, I had some legacy, leftover stuff here from our template. So stay on task isn't about qualifying for a, for a life insurance policy. There we go. Okay, so we'll save that. Actually, before we do, I also want to show you guardrails and explain the difference a little bit between agent style and guardrails. So guardrails is where you kind of like lock down the scope of what your agent is able to do, and you anticipate things that may come up in conversation that you don't want your agent to engage in. And so this was a banking case when we first kind of cloned the template, but so it's a never discuss specific interest rates, never give financial advice, and don't discuss financial products, which is um, a reasonable thing to do because the agent is having an adjacent conversation to that. In our case, it's adjacent to insurance advice. So I'm going to say never discuss, let's see, specific pricing or give a quote. Never give insurance advice. And I'll just make something a little bit more generic. Don't discuss anything outside the scope of your role and prompt. And I might say something more specific. This might have been in here actually. Yeah, we could put something like this more likely in the guardrails, right? So, don't discuss trivia or answer trivia questions. Even if the AI agent may know the answer to some of these questions, there's like no reason for them to engage in that kind of conversation and spend time having that. So I'll just like lock that down. Behind the scenes, we already have like general guardrails about what the AI agent can and can't do. So here's where you would define a little bit more specific things, or if you've listened to your human conversations, your human agents have, and you notice that it's very common for customers to ask certain questions that the AI agent really should never address. You can clarify those guardrails here. The other thing to clarify here is, certain stylistic choices you might want them to never do, like never say or add filler words or never refer to the customer by anything other than client, things like that. So you could add, this is how I think of the guardrails as the never do or the don't do's, and the agent style as the things you want them to do. All right. So I realized I went back to an unnamed version of our agent when I rolled back. So we'll rename that insurance agent or life insurance. Do that. And save. Okay, so now I want to try a couple of things. I want to vary some of these things and show you how you will make this agent more personalized to your specific use case. So the first thing I want to do is try to use the customer data we already have about the customer rather than asking for their first and last name. So imagine the customer has already submitted a lead form on your site, and now they're calling in to talk about life insurance, or even you're calling them. It'd be more magical if instead of asking for their first and last name, you could actually just call them by name, right? And make it personal from the start. And so I'll get rid of this one here and do that. It's a little annoying because now I've got to change my numbers, but honestly, if I didn't change these, it would still work, but I'll do it because I'm a little OCD. And we've only got 6 now. Okay, so now it'll start by saying, hi, Rebecca, presumably. This is Kate, a virtual agent from Circle Life. How are you today? So before we save, you'll see here that I've now referenced this, and under the hood in Regal, as you're sending data to Regal, or as you ask us to kind of hit an API or a CRM on your side, we build a profile of every customer under the hood so that the AI agent can refer to their information in a personalized way. And the way that I invoke this is I just like started by calling these double curly brackets. I could also click this here to add contact attributes. And here you'll see that once I define that attribute, it's over here, or once I've invoked it, and now I can define what it means. So first name is very descriptive, so the AI agent will understand what it means. But let's say you had some acronym here for a piece of data, it might not know. So we'll just say the customer's first name. And because we're testing it through a test UI, it's not an actual phone call where it would have my actual phone number to look up my profile and get my data. We have to give it some test value in this interface. So I'm going to give it the test value of Rebecca. And I'm going to save. All right, let's test our agent and make sure it knows how to refer to me.
Hi, Rebecca. This is Kate, a virtual agent from Circle Life. How are you today?
Awesome. Okay, so that worked. Now, I also kind of want to show you how to change the voice, right? We've been playing with Marissa a lot, but I want to show you the varied voices you could play with. So let's pick a voice, a couple of obvious choices we can make. Let's go ahead and pick a male voice and see what that sounds like. And you can actually test out the voices. We've got a lot of different providers you can choose from. I'll just go ahead and pick this male voice. Select. Again, I'm going to save. And honestly, if you're doing real testing, I'm just iteratively building this, but if you're doing real testing of different versions, you probably want to name them. So I'll just call this male voice. Cool. Now let's go ahead and play that.
Hi, Rebecca. This is Kate, a virtual agent from Circle Life. How are you today?
All right, so I forgot to change the name. Most likely that wouldn't be Kate's voice, but that's okay for our demo. And then let's do something else. We also have different accents. So let's find Amy, she's British, and try that one as well. All right.
Hi, Rebecca. This is Kate, a virtual agent from Circle Life. How are you today?
Cool. So that's how you can play with different voices. And again, once you've picked a different voice that you like, you might want to adjust this. Some voices will speak a little bit faster or louder, etc. And so you could adjust all these toggles again once you've settled on the voice. One other thing I want to show you, which is fun, is we can change the language that this agent speaks. And you can do that without even changing the voice. So I'll go ahead and, at the risk of you hearing my terrible Spanish, I'm going to make this a multilingual agent. Let's start with that. So we'll make this a multilingual agent, which means this agent can actually support the customer in Spanish or English. It'll detect automatically what language the customer is speaking, and it will support them in either of those languages. It's also good practice to let that customer know, not just to change the language here, but to let the agent know, because our whole prompt is in English, the default behavior is that it probably thinks it can only speak in English. But given that I want to let it support the customer in Spanish as well, I'm going to say that too. You can support the customer in English or Spanish, depending on the language they speak. I'll do that here as well, just for like this kind of redundancy is helpful sometimes. So let's go ahead and save that. So I expect the agent to start the conversation in English because they know no better, and I'm telling them to say this exact thing. And then I'm going to speak in Spanish and see if they can switch to Spanish, just so that it's not odd. I won't also make them do it with a British accent. So let's go ahead and we'll go back to Marissa and we'll have her do it. All right, let's go ahead.
Hi, Rebecca. This is Kate, a virtual agent from Circle Life. How are you today?
Hola, habla español, por favor?
Are you still with me, Rebecca? I just have a few questions to ask, and then I can connect you to a licensed advisor to understand policy options and get a custom quote. First, how old are you?
Okay, that didn't work. Let's try it again. Okay, so first what I'm going to do is try to get the agent to speak in a different language. I'm going to pick Spanish and try that first. So here, I'm actually going to tell the agent that they are a Spanish-speaking agent. You are a Spanish-speaking agent. You can support the customer in Spanish only. Let's try that. All right.
Hola, Rebecca. Soy Kate, una agente virtual de Circle Life. ¿Cómo estás hoy?
Okay, I don't know enough Spanish to be able to speak back to her, but you can see that by saying I changed to a Spanish speaking language. I let her know she speaks Spanish, and I told her she can only support the customer in Spanish. So if I had started to speak English, she would have said in Spanish that she can only support me in Spanish. So there's a couple of different paradigms you can employ for AI agents. If it's a Spanish and English speaking agent that you want them to be able to switch off, you can pick this option. If you only want the agent to speak one language, you can pick the language, and then you could have the agent have an objection where if the customer asks to speak in a different language, you have the agent transfer them to a different speaking agent. That's a common paradigm as well. So that reminds me that we've not actually filled out any questions and objection handling. So let's try to do that because so far the conversations we've been having have been very kind of on point, happy path. The customer says exactly what we expect them to say. They don't ask any questions or take the agent off script. So what I don't know that much about life insurance. So what I did before this is I looked up what are common objections or questions customers might ask for life insurance in ChatGPT. So I'm going to just go with that for now and copy paste this. I would expect you as a real brand to have a sense of the common objections that your customers might bring up um, in a conversation like this. But we can also help you in terms of defining what these are by listening to your calls or putting the agent live and listening to calls and seeing what are the most common things that come up. So I'm going to go ahead and again, it's my OCD. You don't actually have to do this. It doesn't matter, but we'll save that. And now this has questions, just so we remember, and objections. So I'm going to try to take the agent off course and see that they're able to get back to their task. And let me just see what kind of questions I actually want to ask. I'll ask, maybe, is this a sales call and will this affect my credit at some point? So let's go for it. I'm going to put this in English so I can actually speak to the agent. And get rid of this and get rid of this. All right.
Hi, Rebecca. This is Kate, a virtual agent from Circle Life. How are you today?
Is this a sales call?
Not at all. I'm just here to gather some quick info so a licensed expert can help you understand your options if you're eligible. It'll only take a minute. I just have a few questions to ask, and then I can connect you to a licensed advisor to discuss policy options and get a custom quote. To get started, could you please tell me how old you are?
Yeah, I'm 40.
Thank you, Rebecca. Next, could you please share why you are looking for insurance today?
Wait, is this going to affect my credit score?
Nope. Getting a quote or speaking with an advisor doesn't impact your credit score. Now, could you please let me know why you are looking for insurance today?
Great. So you can see that the agent was able to handle my objections, but then quickly get right back to the task, no matter which point of the conversation I took her off course. So I think that is what I wanted to show you today. Just to recap, we talked about how you can build your AI agent and define its role and goal, its task steps, its personality, and also put objection and question handling into that. We also showed you how to build a couple of actions that the agent could take and invoke throughout the course of the conversation. We played around with some of the voices that you can test out and see what works best for your audience in the different settings. We demonstrated how to personalize a conversation by referring to contact information you already know about the customer. In this case, we just did a simple example of first name. And we also showed you how you can kind of play with and change up the personality that would actually change up your agent. So thanks so much. Ali, let's see if we have any questions.
Thank you for that, Rebecca. Yeah, like pretty action-packed. We got to see a lot of stuff. And I think for so many people in our audience, it feels great to speak with a virtual agent or an AI phone agent. It feels like magic when it works really well, but often people don't understand how the sausage is made. And so I'm really happy that we were able to show people really how to go from end to end in building an agent. Lots of stuff happened today. We saw Rebecca go from ages 21 to 40. We saw her journey in discovering the Spanish language and its beauty. But we also have some questions from the audience on more important things. So I'll get to those. And again, please feel free to use the Q&A function below to ask any other questions you have. And if we have time today, we will get to it. If we don't have time today, we will leave you in the chat with an email address where you can email us anytime and answer any questions. Or ask any questions. So the first question I have here is, what's a good first use case for someone just getting started?
Great question. It really depends on your business. I'll give you the criteria for how I would think about picking your first use case. So Most importantly, I would pick a use case that is big and impactful to your business, right? If you were to successfully deploy an AI agent, would it matter? Would everyone from the CEO down care? And would you be a hero if it was successful? I find customers sometimes think about de-risking AI by trying to pick the smallest use case first, and then they find out it takes all the same amount of work. And then once it does work, nobody cares because it's so small. And so I'd rather you pick a very big and impactful use case and we de-risk it by only rolling out to a very small percent to start and iterate the agent from there. So one is impactful and big. I think the second criteria I would use is um, shorter conversations. It's not to say AI agents can't do 20, 40-minute conversations. We do have agents in production doing that. But for your first use case, I would pick a conversation that tends to be, something sub 5 minutes on average or something sub 10 minutes on average, because I think it'll be pretty simple for you to get started quickly with the kinds of task steps that I just showed. And again, it'll feel good to get the use case live and get a reaction from your customers, because a short, small use case will help you figure out, do my customers accept speaking to AI? It'll help you figure out, how do you actually deploy the AI in your contact center? How do they interact with your humans when they need to transfer and escalate? You'll learn all the same things and it'll take you much less time to build it. And then finally, I would think about, what are the use cases where you find your agents today doing what you perceive to be kind of rote or mundane, repetitive type of conversations where they complain about it or they get jaded about doing the conversation, or it's where you put your junior agents and then you kind of like graduate them out of. Those are the first places I would, start. And I think what that tends to lead to in terms of the kinds of use cases, a lot of qualification use cases like the one you just saw me demo, um, inbound support, right? Like the initial, hey, why are you calling today? How can I help you? And then triaging it or answering common FAQs or taking short actions like updating something on a customer's account, but then transferring the rest of them to human agents. Collections or payment calls, that's a very uncomfortable call for a human to have. But AI agents don't have emotions. And so they know how to have that conversation in a sufficiently empathetic yet pushy way, which you can literally define those exact words within their personality or their style. Those are the three that I think like tend to be the ones I've seen people start with the most. And then I'll say one more that tends to be in like the home services space or in the healthcare space, which is scheduling an appointment reminder, since it's such a common use case and so time consuming, and it's also very rote. And you don't want to take a doctor's time, which is very expensive to do those kinds of calls, or even a receptionist time. So those are the four that I would call out.
Great. Yeah. I think this concept of de-risking is so interesting as we're seeing, the AI landscape evolve in CX. Like, as a marketer, the concept of testing something big is nothing strange for me. And I'm sure, like, for those of you on the call, when you talk to your web team, your digital team, and they're A/B testing new copy, they're not doing it on a page that only 10 people land on a month, right? They're A/B testing on your homepage to see what will drive greater impact. And I think that in CX, we can take a lot of lessons from sort of how marketers operate in that way. Um, Another question that we got in here is about replacing an IVR and how like an AI agent might fold into replacing an IVR system.
Yeah, that's a great use case. That was one of the ones I mentioned when I said that inbound customer support. So we've seen, I mean, IVRs suck. I think we all know that. It's very rigid and most people just yell human into it. And so I think the goal of replacing your IVR with an AI agent, the very first thing is, how do you get it so that the AI agent can just welcome the customer as if they're a human agent, have the customer speak in natural language to explain what their issue is, and then the AI agent, without having to ask them to like press one for this, press two for this 100 times, they could just determine the intent of the customer and decide what department to transfer them to. That has value in and of itself, because I've heard as much as from customers, as much as like 40% wrong department transfers is something they deal with. And they're very costly, because you have a customer speaking to an agent in a department, asking them a bunch of questions, taking that agent's time, then them realizing they actually have to go to a different department where they have to transfer. The customer then has to wait again, and then another human's time is taken. And so that's a very costly problem. And so AI agents are a great solution for that, to avoid that issue. And then, as I said, as you think about the most common reasons people call, or the simplest reasons people call, you can then start having the AI agent just handle those use cases and start shaving off the number of places that an AI agent even has to transfer to a human. So
Yeah.
that's a great way to get started.
Yeah, I think like the IVR thing is so interesting. I think there's this misconception that, people who have trouble with an IVR maybe are of an older generation, boomers, but we're actually seeing, and you'll see some exciting market research come out from Regal very soon. But what we're seeing is that even Gen Z and Gen Alpha, they're used to getting information that they need on demand, right? Whether it's from their voice assistants, their Alexa, their Siris, their smart home devices. And so outside of the obvious cost benefits of not redirecting or misrouting calls, there's so much to be said for like customers hopping on a call, being treated with integrity, and how that makes them more likely to convert or spend money or retain or whatever action you want them to take when they feel like the interaction gets off to a good foot and they're not having to yell human or representative into the phone over and over again until they can finally reach someone. All right, we have a question here about inbound versus outbound. This is something that I know we hear a lot, and you speak to our customers a lot about, Rebecca. Do you have any insight on whether an AI agent is the right choice for inbound or outbound, or what you'd recommend to people?
Yeah, we've seen AI agents successfully deployed across both inbound and outbound cases, which is why it wasn't one of the criteria I gave when was saying like which ones would I start with. It really doesn't matter. I think like technically, I think it's easier probably to implement an inbound use case from scratch, especially if you have an IVR, because it's such an obvious place to start. And I think the kind of telephony integration about like how to get an inbound call in is like very obvious and easy. And there are a couple more questions about outbound calls, but we've seen AI agents perform just as well on inbound and outbound. One other thought is like, depending on your use case for outbound, like if you have hyper engaged or highly engaged leads, like I just submitted a life insurance quote request or something like that. Now you're calling me, that's a great use case for AI agents. If it's like, hey, that was 10 months ago, and now the AI agent has to call you once every month for the next 10 years of your life, like the AI agent, their performance like won't be any worse, but like the call's just not going to get answered at a very high rate. So you might not learn as fast on that use case. So I would answer it not that AI agents perform better on inbound or outbound cases, but more so like when you're thinking about deploying AI agents, again, to get back to the point I was making about pick an impactful use case, don't just think of it as a cost savings, think of it as a way to actually improve the customer experience and business performance. And so you want to get as much or as many data points as quickly as possible. And so if you put them on a very long tail outbound use case that has a very low answer rate, you're just going to need so much longer to get a signal on the performance of the agent. So that's why sometimes I might nudge a customer to start with inbound, but agents perform equally well on both.
All right. And we have a couple other questions that we have time for. So we have one attendee who asked, I think looking at his email that they're in Medicare Advantage, but basically the question is around if you're running a seasonal business, can you spin agents up and down depending on volume?
Yes. I mean, that's one of the biggest advantages of AI agents is that you don't need to, they're not fixed staffing. I know in the Medicare space, this also happens in the home insurance space when there's a disaster like a hurricane or fire. You need to all of a sudden go hire a ton of people within a very short amount of time and train them. And obviously, not only is that operationally intensive and time intensive and expensive, but what are the odds that they're going to create and provide a great level of service for your customers? It's very low because they don't know your brand. They haven't trained for a long time. It's kind of on the spot. And so AI agents are a fantastic solution for that kind of staff constrained situation. You can scale them up or scale them down. You only pay for usage anyway. And they have unlimited scale.
Got it. Yeah. And the last thing today that I'd love for you to touch on, Rebecca, is like we talk all the time internally here at Regal about how getting from 80% to 95% is the hardest. And so a lot of people want to play around with things like this. And of course, our customers are welcome to use the AI agent builder like you showed today to build their own agents, test them out, play around. But talk to me a little bit about that 80 to 95% and sort of where Regal comes in then for anybody listening.
Yeah, I mean, you guys watched me build what I would call an 80% agent. There were things about the conversation that I didn't love. I didn't love the way she asked me about my age, so I probably would have iterated that a little bit. There were things about the voice I probably would have changed. And then there's a bunch of these different settings on the side that I didn't really talk about to make, I guess, edge case handling more consistent. So, what if all of a sudden the agent doesn't hear what the customer says, right? So we have feature sets around those edge cases. Oh, every 10 seconds, like if the customer hasn't said something, have a reminder message like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Can you say that again? Right. So there's all this edge case handling. We do have feature sets around, but that is a common thing that happens. Like once you deploy your agent, what you're going to learn is what actually happens in real life, right? You're going to go review a bunch of real customer conversations and collect data about those. What percent of the customers is the agent qualifying? Are they qualifying accurately? Are customers hanging up quickly on the agent? Are there certain drop-off points? Or qualitatively, are customers not just saying yes, no, I'm a smoker? Are they saying like, I don't know, like once in college, I like smoked. Okay, well, that's probably not a smoker, right? So we want to make sure to get the agent from 80% to 95%, what you have to do is put it live, and then Regal works with you to collect quantitative and qualitative data of how are your customers actually responding to it, what are the different scenarios we need to handle better, and constantly iterate the agent to get to outperforming your humans. That's a very, very iterative, data-driven, but also qualitative and time-consuming process to do that. And then there's lots of different choices you can make for different edge cases. Like I said, if you see like 1% of your customers speak French, okay, we can spit up a French agent and have them transfer to the French agent. So there's a lot of work that goes into it. If you end up, I just put in like 10 or 15 questions in objection handling. If in your business, really, there's like a huge range of questions and objections that can come up, maybe it's best for us to actually deploy a knowledge base and connect in your Zendesk knowledge base or something like that, and then train the agent on how to use that. So those are some of the things that go into getting it to 95%.
Great. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, Rebecca. I think the goal of today's session really is to show that in many ways, when we see things on LinkedIn, on social media, we hear about AI in the news, it feels like this concept that feels far away and maybe a little bit inaccessible to those of us who work on the business side. And figuring out how to use it can be challenging. And so really between, Regal's professional services and the team here who does this with dozens of customers across industries every single day, and features like our AI agent builder that are no code and built for business users like Rebecca and myself. Well, Rebecca's not a business user, I am. People like myself who don't have a tech background to be able to play around with. I think that really is the magic combination. We hear from people all the time in CX that AI maybe wasn't on their roadmap for this year, right? This year was the year where they were going to switch from, nice and contact to Genesis, and that's what they had planned. And AI has all of a sudden thrown a wrench into what they thought their year was going to look like. But the reality is, when you look at the landscape today, if you're not exploring voice AI, at least for a portion of your call volume, if you're not doing it right now, you're already running behind. And the companies that are moving quickly will really have first mover advantage here. So we're really excited here at Regal to partner with you, share more information, give you insight into how you can make this work for you in a way that really drives revenue for your business, lowers costs, boosts CSAT. And to get any more information or talk to someone here about how this might work for you, feel free to go to our website, www.regal.ai. We also have a bunch of pre-built scenarios on there across tons of industries, all the way from e-commerce to life insurance to regular insurance, healthcare, education, you name it, on our website. So you can just put in a phone number and speak to an agent, and that'll give you a sense of maybe how a simple use case like qualification or appointment scheduling or collecting payment or rescheduling might work on your end or for your business. So feel free to check those out again at regal.ai. They're right there available for you to test yourself. And lastly, I know we mentioned at the beginning today that we have a raffle. So we're going to put the winner of the pickleball set here in the chat. We'll also reach out via email as well in case someone dropped off. But we are excited to share that with you, help you get summer going in a great way. But most importantly, we have a ton of information about how you can leverage AI voice and AI phone agents on our website today. So feel free to check that out. Follow us on LinkedIn as well at regal.ai, and we will keep sharing all the innovations within the AI agent builder that you saw today as things continue to develop. But thank you so much for taking the time to attend. We're always thrilled to talk to our audience and share more about how AI isn't just a concept that exists far in the future. It's something that people are using every single day. And in most use cases, we're seeing Regal's voice AI outperform human agents routinely, especially when companies have devoted the time to testing and iterating and getting from that 80 to 95%. And we're optimistic that we can do the same for you, regardless of your industry. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions. You can also email us at hello@regal.ai, and someone will get back to you and route you to the right person. But yeah, stay tuned for our next webinar where we'll cover many other parts of the Regal platform and how AI functions, whether that's A/B testing, measuring, and evaluating performance of AI agents. So lots more to come in this series. But thank you, Rebecca. Thank you for everyone attending, and we will talk to you soon.